Good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your busy days to join us for this webinar. If you have any problems with sound, please let us know by typing in the chat box, because you are all in listen-only mode, and you will be in listen-only mode throughout the webinar. My name is Derek Armstrong, and I'm the Veterinary Science Lead with EuroDairy. I'm delighted to bring you tonight's webinar on a farmer-led approach to responsible antimicrobial use on UK dairy farms from the Farmer Action Group project. Our presenters today are Lisa Morgans from the University of Bristol and Graham Wells, a dairy farmer who took part in the Farmer Action Group. Tonight's webinar has been delivered as part of the EuroDairy network. The network includes 14 countries, from Ireland to Poland and from Sweden to Italy. It aims to put farmers at the centre of practice-based innovation by sharing knowledge and solutions. You can find out more about the EuroDairy project by visiting the website www.eurodairy.eu. And just a quick reminder that there is another EuroDairy webinar on antibiotics tomorrow morning, the Swedish take on responsible antibiotic use with Ylva Persson. Tonight's webinar has proved very popular, with registrations from dairy farmers, vets, nutritionists, consultants and researchers from 8 countries right across Europe and the world. Lisa and Graham will run through their presentation, which should take around 30 minutes, and then there will be time for comments and questions at the end. As I said at the beginning, you'll all stay muted throughout the webinar, but if anyone would like to ask a question, then please type your question in the box on the right-hand side of your screens. I'll ask Lisa her questions at the end of her presentation, and we'll aim to finish up within an hour. So without further delay, I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for tonight. Lisa Morgans is a veterinary surgeon in the final stages of her PhD training at the University of Bristol, where she's supervised by Dr. Christian Rare, Dr. Maria Escobar, and Professor David Main. And for my sins, I'm her EuroDairy Dairy supervisor. She is sponsored by EuroDairy Dairy and the Langford Trust, and she's interested in farmer-led approaches to improve farm animal health and welfare. Lisa worked in mixed practice in Cornwall for 2.5 years, and it became clear that she wanted to work in the farm animal sector. She has great first-hand experience of the challenges surrounding antimicrobial usage, and from that experience, she feels a fresh approach to the problem involving a bottom-up approach could help. Graham Wells is a participating farmer, and he's going to give his insights into being part of the Farmer Action Group project and the cross-border learning on a EuroDairy trip to the Netherlands. Graham's part of a family team managing and running a 280-strong Holstein Friesian herd in Somerset, averaging over 8,000 litres per cow per year in an all-round calving pattern. So, without further delay, it's over to you, Lisa and Graham.
Thanks for that, Derek. Thank you for the lovely introductions, and good evening to you all that's tuning into this webinar this evening. We hope to leave you feeling inspired and quite optimistic about farming's role in responsible antimicrobial use, and to give you some ideas and tools to reduce the need for antimicrobials in farming. So we'll just hand over to Graham to introduce himself, why he's here.
Hi, I saw Lisa's article looking for volunteers to assess the antibiotic usage and help the project towards reducing them. After contacting, became a part of our nearest group, which is a good mix of herd size and different systems and young stock.
So this evening we're going to cover what is a farmer-led approach firstly, and what does this look like, a bit about Farmer Action Group project, a first-hand account from Graham that's been part of this from the start, and then we'll wrap up with a bit of an international perspective from the Netherlands after a knowledge exchange trip there to learn about how they produced their country's use. So firstly, a bit of background. The thinking behind this project came directly from Denmark, from the Stable School project, which was run by a lady called Mette Vast. And this was all about harnessing farmer expertise, local experience and knowledge about farming to solve complex issues such as antimicrobial use. So in the early 2000s, this project ran with monthly meetings between organic dairy farmers, where they were shown around each other's farms, they'd discussed their herd health data, and they'd come up with a list of practical strategies on how they were going to improve and reduce the need for treatments using antimicrobials. And it was seen as such a great success. They actually managed to reduce their treatments of antimicrobials without any detriment to their herd's health and welfare. Even their production parameters are in line with other groups not involved with the stable schools, so much so that the Danish government actually adopted it into legislation. So organic dairy farmers in Denmark have a choice. They can be part of these sort of study groups, these stable schools, or have their vet out more often. And the whole principle of this sort of farmer-led initiative was putting the farmer first. The knowledge that you guys as farmers have about your farm, the experiences you have, is crucial in solving the complex problems seen on farms. And the principles are rooted in things like farmer field schools, which the Farm and Agricultural Organisation have been doing since the 1980s across 90 odd different countries. So it's a very well established technique and method. And we basically have taken that here at the University of Bristol and trialled it in the UK, in the Southwest. So we established 5 groups, like the stable schools, but we called them farmer action groups, just thought that was a bit more reflective of the UK scene rather than stables. And I followed them for 2 years as they met regularly to discuss reducing antimicrobial use. Now, not going to lie, recruitment to this project wasn't straightforward. It was quite a challenging process, and it definitely wouldn't have been possible without close collaboration with AHDB Dairy. So I have to thank them there. But hopefully after you've heard this webinar, if you hear about these sort of things happening near you, or you're interested in taking part in these sort of projects, I really urge you to, because a lot of the farmers that have been in this project have said that the time investment has actually been really worth it. So we had these 5 groups with 30 dairy farmers participating across the 5 groups. And although not like a representative sample of the UK, it's actually been quite illustrative of the different types of dairy farms we have in the UK. So we had 60 cow herds, we had 600 cow herds, block calving systems, spring and autumn, all year round calving, high yielding indoor reared herds, robots, organic, whole spread of systems. And I think that was one of the strengths of the project. And I'll sort of hand over to Graham here to talk a bit about the benefits he had found with his group.
Yes, once we'd overcome the openness of sharing all our information to calculate the farm's usage of antibiotics, we could compare and benchmark our systems and debate the different ways of measuring. When thinking back, farmers can be very shy about what they do on farm and reluctant to share for fear they may be wrong. Also, some were very protective of a system that had worked for them for some time, i.e. blanket dry cow therapy. In our group, we all shared well, even if some had to be coached more on some ideas. The mix of systems was very good, as we could appreciate each had made a choice in their situation and all worked well. Interestingly, the antibiotic levels that were compared over the different systems when you had I'm not going to say it, but a common measurement tool was quite interesting.
Super, thanks, Graham. So what did this farmer action group actually do? Basically, it was regular on-farm meetings to discuss how to reduce the need for antimicrobials. So a very holistic look at the problem. We had 5 to 8 farms in each group. So sometimes there was like 1 person from each farm, sometimes there was 3 or 4 members of the farm. And we did try and encourage the whole farm team to come along where possible, because everybody's involved in these decision-making issues around antimicrobial use, around herd management. So everybody should get involved. And it was a huge time commitment over the 2 years of the project, but generally attendance was pretty good at each meeting, despite the time of year, because these meetings ran throughout all seasons due to the confines of the project funding. So obviously attendance did vary. There were 2 phases to the project. The first phase of meetings involved each member of the group hosting the rest of the group on their farm for the first time and showcasing what they were doing and the confines they were working in. And then the group would work together to come up with a practical list of strategies to reduce the need for antimicrobials. So that was the action plan. That was a key output. And the second phase of meetings was where everybody in the group got to host for a second time, approximately 8 to 12 months after they'd first hosted. And we reflected back on that action plan, revisited what had been changed and what hadn't, and why that might be. So each meeting was about 3 hours long, based on farm, based around lunchtime. So food was essential to the running of this project. And we'd start off with a bit of a catch up, what had been happening on farm since last time, and then head out on the farm walk led by the host farmer. And this was a key part of the practical learning that you guys are so good at doing. And then the real key element here was the facilitated discussions around the farm and the practices on farm. And we were lucky enough to work with Sarah Bolt from EuroDairy at the time, who's great at facilitating these meetings, ensuring everybody stuck together, everybody shared in the conversations, benefited from the conversations, and everybody contributed positive points about what that host farm was doing really well, as well as some areas to focus on, some opportunities for change. But like I said, that key outcome from those first phase of the meetings was a practical action plan that host farmer could work on going forward. So there was often really positive discussion, really supportive about how each other could help come up with an action plan. I was present at every meeting as the veterinarian researcher, but I wasn't there to give advice. I wasn't there to tell the farmers how to do this. However, if there was knowledge gaps identified, or there was something that the group really wanted to know that they couldn't get information for, then myself or the facilitator, Sarah, would provide information at the request of the group. And this came up around the types of antimicrobials that could or couldn't be used on farm, or should or shouldn't be used on farm at the time, the critically important antibiotics. So like I said, this was a facilitated, structured meeting process. It wasn't just a cup of tea and a pasty and let's talk about the weather. This was very structured, very reflective, because we wanted farmers to get as much out of this as possible. So we started off with some fairly safe post-it notes, asking the group to come up with ideas they thought were really good on the host farm that they'd just been around, identifying them in different categories of the farm walk, and then some areas, opportunities for change that we could focus on in the action plan. And these tools and activities Sarah and I devised just to keep everybody's interest in the process and to really help drill into the discussion around how you're going to improve reducing antimicrobial use. We also got a bit imaginative and went down the mapping route. So we asked volunteer farmers to draw the map of the walk they'd just been on, and then place stickers on areas they thought were going really well on that host farm, and then some red stickers to identify maybe pinch points or focus areas for the action plan. We tried to make this as fun as possible. As you can see here, we have dogs being involved, but there was sadly no aspiring Picassos or Van Goghs in the project. We have score charts as well as an activity, so people would anonymously score areas of the farm walk, and it was quite good numerically seeing which were the highest scoring areas of that farm and the lowest scoring areas which could be focused on for the action plan. And we created ranking exercises with ping pong balls as well, which I'm more than happy to elaborate on after the webinar. But ultimately, it was all about creating these action plans. So I'm going to hand over to Graham to talk a bit more about what he thought about the meetings before we move on to the action plans.
Yeah, the meetings were great. We had a good group. We were very open with one another. In the way the good and bad points were noted and varied, which then could be collated in a way that you could prioritize, made it easy for the areas that needed work on to help us reduce antibiotics. And we learned a lot from farmers that are in similar situations, but with obviously the help with Lisa and Sarah guiding us with technical backup and best practices were very worthwhile.
Super. So the action plans varied hugely and didn't just cover pure antimicrobial use. They covered all manner of herd health issues. So we had action plans with as few as 5 or 6 points on, and we had some that had nearly 20 points on. But on average, there were about 10 practical suggestions on how each farm could improve. And it was up to the host farmer to accept or disregard those as they saw fit. These weren't compulsory by any stretch of the imagination. And like Graham said, they were to help you sort of prioritise where to put your efforts. and we revisited those in phase 2, but I'm just going to let Graham elaborate a bit more on what was on his action plan.
Yeah, so after the first meeting where we'd identified areas where we could probably have the best effect on achieving the reductions, we spoke with our own vets and our staff, importantly, which was to find out the best practices to use instead of an antibiotics first option. And by having a better understanding of the problems that we have on our farms, we could then act and try to solve them differently. Do we move on to the action plan now? With it?
Yeah.
Our action plan covered many things. I won't go through the list, it was quite long, but then it was in the best possible taste. We have made our changes following our action plan. In particular, we addressed our lighting situation within the cow buildings to give them optimum lying time, and it was staggering to see the difference in the cow's behaviour. And when the lights came on just in the morning, just for instance before milking, they were up and moving around rather than you going around having to get them up. And the most important thing as well, not just for the cows, was we actually replaced all the lighting in the parlour with LED lighting to give us that daylight lighting in the parlour, which has made our drying off routine a much I'd say easier, instead of using the phone light to see and check your teat ends. So those are good things. I mean, the calf rearing, it's an ongoing project really, but we are measuring weights now more accurately to make sure that they get the right colostrum amounts and the space is improved. We've got lots more to do with concrete replacement. We're trialing vaccinations. One of our problems is coronavirus, and we've adopted a different plan there without the use of antibiotics in the early stages, only looking for protection if there's a secondary problem. We test our clotting milk now. Obviously, if the cow's poorly, she's treated in a normal manner, but if not, we're waiting for a growth on plates to find out if antibiotics are going to be useful. And we found that there's between 20 and 40% actually will recover without antibiotic use, with just pain relief and element. So all good stuff. We're looking forward to a farm kit which will make our testing the milk easier. We also dust and clean our beds for the cows twice a day. Our parlour, as a lot of parlours, they do a lot of work, so we've tested and improved the cleaning of our plant and done dynamic tests to check the teat end vacuums to minimise any damage from that. So lots of things that perhaps we should do more regularly, but it's getting the time and the motivation to do it. And I think the group spurs you on. There's a little bit of competition you want to achieve, and I think that's one of the hidden benefits that you can get is the actual motivation. Yeah,
that's brilliant. That's a massive list of high achievements from your action plan. So that's more than, as a veterinarian in practice, that's more than I could ever have hoped from just advising in a vet capacity. But this sort of peer-to-peer, working in a group, sharing problems and solutions really seems to pay off. So these action plans, as we've just talked about, got revisited in the second phase of meetings. We'd reflect back on, well, what was a success? So just heard from Graham, there's some great sort of milk sampling testing going on, some adaptations for the improving calf health. So they all sound like great successes to me. Lots of things were ongoing still. So on average, at the second meeting, 53% of the actions across the project had been implemented partially or fully. But lots of the particularly block calving herds commented that if they had actions around like calving or newborn calves and they just finished the season, they'd have to wait another 12 months before they could actually implement those. So the time frame of revisiting these things is definitely worth considering. And some things were disregarded. And we had a couple of disasters, and that was often around selective dry cow therapy. But what was really good to hear was these two particular farms that didn't get on well with selective when they first tried are still willing to give it a go, which is great. So a bit more about what's on these action plans. So this graph just shows you the frequency of the different topics on the action plans. So I just categorized all the different things that came up into these 20 odd different categories on the side axes, and then counted how frequently they were mentioned. So the bottom of the graph, you've got the top 3 most frequently mentioned topics that came up in the action plans. And this was around the cubicle shed design, the cubicle dimensions and the bedding, which isn't really a surprise when you think of the risk factors that is for mastitis, not getting the bedding and cubicle bedding correct. And also you spend a lot of time in these environments as farmers. You spend a lot of time watching the cows, cleaning the cows' bedding area. So actually you have quite a lot of experience to offer when it comes to helping each other improve this area. And the same is true for calf housing. I mean, after mastitis, calf respiratory disease, for instance, is probably the 2nd highest antibiotic use on dairy farms in the UK, and sometimes the highest use for some farms. And 3rd most commonly mentioned was stuff around lameness management, which was quite good to see. There was a lot more appreciation of using anti-inflammatory pain relief and early treatment, and making use of paraprofessionals, foot trimmers, to nip in the bud problems before they get out of control. And interestingly, at the top of the graph, you can see things that weren't mentioned very frequently, despite the fact that we were talked about these issues quite a lot, particularly around TB and vaccination. And as a veterinarian, I would like to have seen more actions around vaccination and biosecurity, and maybe that's something as an industry we should look to think about. But ultimately, this is all about creating on-farm change, stuff that really helps improve the health and welfare of the animals, that you don't need to rely on antimicrobials. So this picture really just demonstrates what a spring block calving herd had done to reduce the risk of respiratory disease in their calves. So they'd identified that was a pinch point. They were using lots of antimicrobials to treat respiratory disease in their calves, and they wanted to adapt their housing so that they could improve. And they had the farm group there for when they hosted. They spent a good half an hour in this shed looking at ways to improve, and myself and the facilitator sort of just took a back step and just let the farming group decide. And these are some of the suggestions that they came up with that the host farmer took on board. And you can see it's a great environment for a calf, and the following season they had a massive reduction in respiratory disease in their calves. Now, it wouldn't be a project of antimicrobial use without some nice graphs measuring it. And this did start off as a bit of an indicator of how well the project was working to start with, and actually turned into a bit of a good discussion tool and something to sort of tear apart in the discussions. So this graph is showing the total antimicrobial use of all the different farms in the project along the bottom axis, as measured in milligrams per kilogram. So this is just one metric. We measured use in various metrics, which I'm not going to talk about just yet. But this is just one way of doing it, and it's from year 1 in the orange bars to year 2 of the project in the grey bars. And as you can see, there's a huge range. We've got from some farms that were, just 1 milligram per kilogram there at the bottom, right up to over 90 milligrams per kilogram of antimicrobial by year 2 on the right of the graph. And this kind of range is reflected in larger data sets from the University of Nottingham. And really is just reflective of the variation in the types of ways of farming. Now I'm going to highlight here the worst offenders on the right, but these farms not only were the higher users of antimicrobials, but they actually increased from year 1 to year 2. And the farmers were really good at noticing that just doing year 1 to year 2 comparison wasn't really good enough to see the trends. And if you had an outbreak or something, or as they pointed out, you switched from antimicrobials that were critically important that we shouldn't be using to more first line products, it really does push up your usage when using milligrams. Just to give you a bit of context, this is similar to the UK measurement using MIGs per PCU, but just uses slightly different cattle weights. And this red bar just roughly, it's a bit high, but presents the national average of about 26 for dairy, just to give you a bit of context there. And about using this metric, about half of the farms in the project actually reduced their total use from year 1 to year 2. But we saw bigger changes in something else, which I'm going to maybe hand over to Graham on this bit if he wants to talk a bit about what he thought about the critically important.
Well, funnily enough, it's something that's been led really, the farmers, by the vets and the pharmaceuticals that have actually been leading the way in terms of the way that these antibiotics work. And it's come from the top. I think all of us look back and say, wow, we got to take hold of this, because if there was any resistance building up in the normal antibiotics and we didn't have these to fall back on, we'd be in a pretty dire place. So responsibility comes back to us at the farm level to reduce or eliminate the use of these and save them for more important uses. And I think throughout the whole project we've learned more about them, and we're all on board, really, I think.
Yeah.
But we have actually still got the ability that with the leading of our vets to use these, and I think that's also important.
Yeah. So the red tracks are brought in this year in June, that without diagnostic tests such as sensitivity testing and a direction from your vet, you cannot now use critically important, highest priority critically important antibiotics. This is a classification set up by the World Health Organization. These are essential medicines for human health care, medicines of last resort, and these are just some examples on your screen. Many more are available, or not, as the case may be. This information around what these medicines are was a definite desire from the farmers in this project, the 30 dairy farmers we work closely with. They didn't know which ones they should or shouldn't be using. They're just going under the direction of their vets. And unfortunately, many vets were not advising at that point in 2016, 2017 about what these were, what we should and shouldn't be using. So we measured usage in these products, and this graph is showing the percentage change as measured in milligrams per kilogram in just the HPCIAs from year 1 to year 2 of the project. So along that bottom axis is the number of different farms, and then the side axis is like either a positive percentage change, so an increase, or a negative percentage change, so a decrease. And you can see the vast majority of farms in the project eliminated or decreased significantly their HPCIA usage. And there were 6 farms that weren't even using any from the start. And this kind of method actually is those 6 farms you kind of want in your group, really, because they're the ones who have not been using these crucial medicines. So how have they been managing? What can we learn from them? And I have circled particularly 2 of the worst offenders over the course of this project for a huge increase in their HPCIA use. And actually, on discussion with them, it can be pinpointed back to a prescribing choice from a veterinarian. One had an outbreak of mastitis, couldn't get rid of it, was prescribed Cobaxan after a few other tubes. And then another one was trying to go to selective, but was still on blanket dry cow therapy at the time, and was prescribed Cefagard, both of which are HPCIAs. So again, this is something that really came out of this project, was vets do have a very crucial role to play here in responsible antimicrobial use. Now, I don't want to give you a biased view of how wonderful this approach is. So there was challenges along the way, and a few limitations with this approach. So I'm just going to quickly go over those, and then Graham's going to give his take on what he thought about these. So it takes time. It is a time investment to participate, but a lot of the farmers in this project actually saw a return on their time investment and the bonus and benefit to their farms. It does rely on you being open-minded, happy to have visitors, happy to share the data, which isn't for everybody. And there was a concern from some veterinarians when recruiting to this project that you get a group of farmers together, there is a risk of poor practice spreading if one guy's got one idea that's maybe a bit wacky. But this is where the dependence on a facilitator is key. And we would say that actually these groups work so much better with a facilitator. They can act like a knowledge broker and identify any needs for knowledge input. So I'll hand over to Graham here to see what he thinks about those.
Yeah, I appreciate those points. I think that time was obviously an issue, but you have to have a bit of a play-off. You don't get anything without putting some time involved, and we certainly benefited from the team. And if you're in an ideal world, everyone on the farm handling the stock should be involved. Practically, it's not as easy as that. I think critically, going forward, we need an easier way to gather our antibiotic usage on farm. Some practices are doing a great job now, but I think it should be pulled together on a bigger scale. And certainly within our group, it'd be great to get together probably annually, but if you had the information easy, that would be not such a chore that it was in some cases. And we could share some more practical tips of how we've been getting on, and or otherwise, really.
Yeah.
The more you get put in, the more you get out, I suppose. Top
phrase there, Graham. Thank you for that. So really, to summarise about the Farm Action Group project before we go into our international perspective, was farmers were driving this. The solutions, the peer support was coming from each other, and we didn't have external speakers or external experts. There was no death by PowerPoint, and that's what really makes a farmer-led approach and makes it so worthwhile. And it has resulted in a change in farmers' practices. Long-term changes, it's going to be hard to see. This project really only ran for 2 years of pure data collection, and I think advice to sort of funding bodies and people running these things is actually the longevity of them should be factored in from the start, and effective facilitation is key. And I'd urge any sort of industry people out there or vets listen to this. If you can get facilitation training, it's invaluable and can really help work together to create better responsible antimicrobial use. Right, so to finish up, we're just going to talk a bit about a 2-day knowledge exchange trip that, to the Netherlands that occurred in October 2016 that Graham was part of. So I'll hand over to you, Graham.
Yeah, it's quite funny. I was just thinking that it was during the time when we were trying to find a group for us, and a phone call came, would you like to go to the Netherlands?
wasn't bribery.
It was quite a, well, okay. But it was very much a trip into the unknown, but actually very enlightening. When we arrived and met some of our hosts at the facilities there, they took us on a tour of their facilities, and the situation that they'd been through was driven out of necessity after warnings of the levels being used in their food production. The way that the different bodies involved, though, pulled together to share the information needed to have an effective measurement tool was impressive. You had vets' invoices sharing the volumes of antibiotics to a common point, the animal registration body giving stock numbers and ages. An agreed breed, age, weight matrix was developed, and this basic information held securely, calculated, giving each farmer a measure of antibiotics for his farm. Once they had this, the benchmarking was easy, and a traffic light type of warning highlighted areas of concern on a monthly basis per farm. Once they had this, the vets had a shift in their actual roles on farm from the fire brigade or the routine. It's moved somewhat to being involved in more time spent around the herd health plan, vaccination, and a move, but a very positive move. We can be critical about the shortfalls of their system, but my word, they had a very good start, well ahead of where we are, and I was definitely impressed. We went on to the farms then. We had a visit to 3 farms, and this was quite a while ago now, but I was thinking back, and they were perhaps some of the better farms, but they were all very different. All the farmers were very welcoming. They were open to share their farm setup and answer any questions. The buildings were very well designed with the security around the outside. There was I even skirted right to the floor, so anything getting in and out of the buildings was a no-no, and that's why often you travel in those countries, you just don't see anything because they're all inside, but they're all very, very well looked after. The antibiotic issue was well embraced, and they are moving forward with less antibiotics and no critically important ones. The cow comfort was outstanding, and I must say they were all backed up with substantial grants. So.
40%.
When we asked one farmer, they were moving into some new buildings that were pretty well all singing and dancing from the old builds, but they were still milking in their original parlour. And I commented to them, how's it going? Are the cows enjoying it? And he confessed the cows did like the old cubicles. But importantly for me, the one thing I noticed there was a cranked headrail. And this, I was in the process at home of being annoyed with a cubicle that was not fit for purpose. The cows weren't rising or settled in them at all. And just by finding that cranked headrail has transferred the cubicles to my cow's cubicle of choice.
Ah.
So there, it was a great, if there was one thing to learn, that was my little thing there. So to finish up there, I mean, I suppose it was the cream on the cake really, was to actually end up at their research facilities, which covered everything from the buildings that the cows designed around, the feeding of the cows, the cubicles, the flooring, the bed types, even had poo hoovers. Each her heart out, yeah, okay. But it was amazing to see so much positivity around milking cows and the things needed to do it efficiently and in the best possible practice ways. It was great.
Yeah. And I'll put my little vet interjection there, but I don't know if you noticed from the pictures I've just shown you, was the sort of boot covers and overall covers and just neat tidiness and attention to detail. The biosecurity levels really struck us as a lot better than it is in the UK, for instance. And I think we've kind of got some ground to make there, particularly when you think about biosecurity impacting on antimicrobial use. And our final activity really on this exchange was reflecting back on all the wonderful information we'd received from our Dutch partners about how they'd reduced their antimicrobial use as a country and how that looked on farm, and what could we take as a UK party to the UK, what can we learn from that and use here. And I really think we had proper database envy about the centralised point for all the data that the vets inputted into that data about the sales of medicines that were going on to farm. And then there was this regular update for the vet and farmer in that close partnership to see how much antimicrobial was using. And if the farm did go into the red in that traffic light system, so did the vet. So, well, to wrap up and get ready for your questions, we just want to give you a bit of an explanation to why we called this Antibiotics Anonymous. So this phrase came about from two independent farmers, actually, to describe the process they'd gone through being part of this project. They likened it to Alcoholics Anonymous, the AA, and how you got this sort of supportive environment to help you make changes, to gain confidence in changing your practices. So that's sort of in honour of that, really. And hopefully we've persuaded you of the benefits of this kind of approach. For any farmers listening out there, I'd urge you to join up to anything you hear along these lines, or ask your vet, your AHDB, KE staff to run things like this. And if you can get facilitation training, please do. Yeah, we'd just like to say thank you very much for listening, and over to you for questions.
Thank you very much, Lisa and Graham. And just a quick reminder that if you have any questions, to type them into the question box or the chat box. I think it's on the right-hand side of the screen, but maybe on the left-hand side of the screen. But we have had some questions typed in already, but please take your opportunity now to type in any questions for Graham and Lisa. Thank you both for a great presentation. You mentioned high priority, critically important antimicrobials. At the start of the project, how much did farmers know about that, and how much do other farmers, perhaps that weren't part of this project, how aware are they currently of this, of what is and isn't a high priority, critically important antimicrobial?
Okay, I'll give this on to Graham first.
Thank you, Lisa. I think we were pretty well aware, and whilst there were some that we weren't sure on, it was generally the newer type of antibiotics that have come on the market over the last maybe 10 years. But I think within the broader farmer spectrum, I think some of the pressures actually come from where your milk's going, in the milking world anyway. Certainly some customers are more interested, and I think in the UK it's something we would do well to be on the front foot on rather than the back foot.
I think generally speaking across all the 30 farms in the project, the majority kind of heard of the phrase, but at the time of starting this project in 2016, but didn't really know the details. And by the end of the project this summer, when you shout out to the group, you know, what's a highest priority, particularly important antibiotic, I would expect like trade names to be shouted out, but actually we got third, fourth generation cephalosporin, fluoroquinolones. So the learning process people had gone through was, you know, quite substantial, and I think a lot of farmers felt more confident about knowing the products they had on farm and where they fell.
That's great, thank you. I think, Graham, you mentioned one of the things you noted from your visit to the Netherlands was the change in relationship between farmers and vets in the Netherlands. Would you say that there's been any change in that relationship between you and your vet, or between other farmers in these action groups and their vets over the course of the project?
Yeah, interestingly, our vet's been very supportive, and has enjoyed the discussion that I've taken back from the meetings, and I think we're lucky in that, yes, we're in that position. Maybe it may not be the same having spoken to some farmers in more distant areas of the country,
where there hasn't been the same focus. Okay. Sorry, Lisa.
So you're saying there's a difference in sort of the vet relationship in different parts of the...
Yeah, I think some areas of the country are more engaging on this subject than others, and perhaps from HTB or somewhere you could initiate some extra training or knowledge sharing.
Do you think that the benchmarking in the Netherlands was a big driver for that as well? I think you mentioned that in your talk. Do you think that if we had a more national system of benchmarking, that would help? That's one of the questions that's come in. Is it possible for a new system, and there is a new system being developed to replace BCMS, to have the add-on to collect medical data on microbial use? Or, you know, what would your opinion be on whether a national system would be attractive to farmers, or whether they would engage with a national system? Because AHTB has been piloting an electronic medicines book.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. When you actually see the level of demands that there can be on farm for recording and on an animal basis, if the information for the actual antibiotics bought via the vets could be automatically loaded onto your usage on the farm, and then I have absolutely no problem with that being used in a calculation to give me the levels used on my farm, and for that information to be then benchmarked against a national average is obviously a great way to know where you are and set yourself targets to achieve a better one, or indeed to discuss with your vets why you are where you are and what you can do and what has happened to have caused that. It's a point that they're using in these countries to better the whole thing. So I've got absolutely no problem, and I think a lot of farmers, once you get over the fact that the information is secure and you can use that to your benefit, I don't think there's an issue. I think get on with it.
The key bit difference there maybe with the eMed book, correct me if I'm wrong, Derek, is compared to the Dutch, is the vets were the ones that populated the database with vet prescription data. The farmers didn't really have to do anything. Yeah. So I think when farmers having to input into a database, there probably would be some resistance. Or just
so I think we're exploring all options in terms of that, and that there may be I know there are some software systems that already provide the opportunity for the vet, if you like, to populate the medicine cabinet, and then the farmer either chooses to do nothing more, but if they want to, they can then take the medicines as they use them out of the medicine cabinet and record exactly what they've used them for.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the other areas is, from working with these groups, were there any particular benchmarking systems that were felt to be more farmer friendly than others? Or what was the view of the sort of benchmarking systems that are available? Was there any discussion of those?
We mean the different ways of measuring, or
different ways of benchmarking, the presenting the usage?
Well, I think the key with the Farmer Action Group project is all benchmarking was accompanied with a decent amount of time to go through it and explain it. And within each group, actually, I'm not going to say this, anonymity often went out of the window, which you could argue is actually proves to be a bit more useful to individual farmers, because they know actually, oh, you know, Joe Blogs next door, he's a really low user. So sometimes the anonymousness of benchmarking can actually be a hindrance. But if you split, I think the time, just having a report accessible so you can see where you stand as a farm against other people is great, but unless you're going to drill into it and understand how that might change or how that might look as a different farm, then it is of limited value. I don't know if that's answered the question.
No, that's fine. I think that as long as you have some sort of standardized system and you know how you stand in a traffic light against the traffic light system, then at least you know whether you're high, low, or medium within various parts of your farm, and whether your problem is in with mastitis or pneumonia or enteritis, hopefully then comes out of the benchmarking system as an area to focus on.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, another question from Jan. You were disappointed at the low level of vaccination in the action plans, and she was wondering if there were any thoughts why, or there weren't any thoughts why. Is it because they're not suitable products for protection against pneumonia? And you know, is it something that we should be looking to the pharmaceutical industry for further help on? Was there any particular reason you thought why vaccination uptake wasn't increased? Or
yeah, well, talking to some of the farmers, that when we were having discussions around vaccination, cost was a very prohibitive factor when they didn't see immediate returns on doing the vaccine, because it is a bit of a playing for the long game. You know, you're trying to improve the general health and immune response of your animals over time. Whereas if you give an antibiotic for a disease, the animal gets better, hopefully, if it's appropriate, straight away. So there was this kind of, if I'm going to put that amount of effort and money into it, what do I see in return? That's quite hard to convince people. And at the start of the project, when the milk price was worse, vaccine seemed to be one of the things that kind of dropped off. So talking to, say, pharmaceutical industries, I mean, I'd be a bit, I suppose, argumentative here, but could they be cheaper? I think that is one of the barriers. I don't know what you think. I mean, Graham's obviously been doing some vaccines.
Costs are issues, and when you run trials, you have to do both parts of the trials, not just effectively think you're going to get a cheap, some cheap vaccine. So the ones that we've been using on the cows at the moment, they've been really, really strictly monitored, and by doing that, you actually have that opportunity of proving a result of cost effectiveness. And I think that's probably what we lack, is actually having that actual proof on farm. So working with perhaps the pharmaceuticals to prove in our instance the benefits is something perhaps we need to spend a bit more time with, because I'm sure, yes, we could all benefit from better use of, as we've said and heard from other countries, that their vaccine levels are increasing as an option for reducing the use of antibiotics.
Yeah. And then the other thing as a theory I've got about what occurs on the action plans and what doesn't, the things that did occur a lot, potentially farmers felt a lot more empowered to do stuff about and had a lot more expertise around changing the cubicle sheds, changing the calf housing, managing lameness. They've been in those environments for a while, they've had training around lameness management. Whereas vaccines, how many actually know how they're working, when to give them, are they giving them correctly? There's a lot more uncertainty around that. So is that why farmers didn't feel as empowered to advise each other on that? That could be one suggestion.
Okay, well, one of the things that could potentially help with better recording would be if we also recorded vaccine use in when we're recording medicines and got some outcome data as well. Then potentially we could start to share information on how effective different vaccines were on different farms. But that's probably phase 3 of the electronic medicines book and benchmarking.
Yep.
Building a great picture there, Derek.
Holy grail.
Kevin, who was involved in your Dorset group, is with us this evening, and he asked if you agree that good stockmanship is as vital as knowledge of correct antibiotic use. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So,
yeah.
and oddly enough, great stock. There are some fantastic stockmen out there, and sometimes they also are some of the hardest people to talk around. I've always done this, to actually adopting a method of let's try it this way.
Yeah, it's great. Do you want to elaborate on?
No, Darren. don't know who's listening.
But that's a very good point. And at the end of the day, all the responsible antimicrobial use comes down to a person, and knowledge and information is only part of that. But how you make decisions, your habits, what influences what you do, which all factors into a good or bad stock person, is crucial. And I mean, it would be good. I obviously can't do it with my data set, but it would be wonderful to see if we could somehow profile the perfect stock person and then compare that to their antimicrobial use. But that is a project for another time.
You're a typical researcher, already thinking of the next research project.
on the farm, you do tend going around and seeing and talking to different people. You often do get this comment. I always do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although I did have one farmer tell me once that there's a big corporate group of farms who found somebody who said they'd always done it that way, and he says, well, you've been doing it wrong for the last 20 years. So I think that comes back to your point earlier, that there is a risk of spreading poor practice if you're not careful, and that is why a good facilitator is key to this. But how would you see groups like this being developed further? You mentioned at the beginning how in Denmark they're actually quite an integrated part of their industry over there. Have you any ideas how this might be integrated into the dairy industry in the UK?
Yeah, so we would like there to be an easily accessible, funded facilitation service, I suppose. So somewhere farmers could form their own groups about any issue. It doesn't have to be responsible antimicrobial use. It could be environmental stewardship, like is already happening with the Game and Wildlife Trust and others. It could be about TB, for instance. But if they were to be able to access simply, fairly cheaply, a facilitator to help with that process, then we would really advocate that. And getting more people trained and accredited as facilitators. There's not really in the agricultural sector a go-to professional body for facilitation, and my supervisor David Main and co are trying to push for that, so it's something farming communities can go to, and really just getting the word more out there in the farming community and encouraging people that maybe don't engage normally, they don't usually see at meetings, wouldn't be keen on this process, to actually maybe give it a try or form a group with people that they trust. That's something I would advocate as well.
And do you think that vets within vet practices would be good leaders, or would it be better coming from outside vet practices based on your experience in this project?
If I would like vets to be able to do this, particularly on a subject like antimicrobials, because vets are the prescribers, but vets need to have facilitation training, and that's something else that's not given routinely in vet school. The kind of communication style vets trained in is very top down. It's very, this is how you should do something, heed my advice. Whereas facilitation training is a lot more working with people in more of a team sense to try and come together to a solution as one team. So if vets can get facilitation training, which would help if we had an accredited professional body of facilitators, then vets could easily lead this. That would be a good idea.
You mentioned you used a number of techniques to extract ideas from the group. From both of you, like which idea you think worked best for you in terms of generating those ideas?
What did you like best, Graham?
I think that probably you had different colours where you thought it was whether the certain colours were higher in their importance. The numbers one worked well, where you could score if you thought something was really important or needed addressing, you put a higher score on. I think it was a matter of those ways. Actually, then you could see quite easily the areas that would benefit you most to give some attention. Would you prefer?
Yeah, I quite like the ping pong balls. Yeah, because that was just you had to get up, you had to like walk to the bowl that would signify the different area of the farm walk. So it was a bit more active. So, don't want to just sit there and be talked at.
Doesn't want too windy.
Yeah, doesn't want too windy. But I mean, lots of these activities are inspired. Like Sarah and I kind of thought up together with inspiration from the charity sector, because they're quite good at working with communities to come up with solutions by reflecting on your own practice. So. Yeah.
I think there could be a comment from me. I think that there could be a great benefit from finding some training for general people that are working with animals, certainly around the best practices from the veterinaries. I'm sure it could be done, but perhaps the funding is the problem. Farmers have got holes in their pockets.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. There's one final question as we come to the end from Stephen online. Do you think if the groups continued, you'd continue to see an ongoing improvement in the health of the herds in the group?
Oh, I'd really hope so.
Yeah, I think I would. I think that, as I mentioned, if the information that we have given could be kept up together and easily got into a central point, certainly on an annual basis, just to have even the results come through, I think would be useful. And then if there was a serious change or some different thinking or any further work needed, we actually still have that connection and ongoing results to go from, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that one of the costs, certainly in the dairy industry, I don't know, did I mention it about cell counts? No, I didn't mention it. Is one of the costs effectively of using less antibiotics and finding out if the cows need antibiotics when you've got a few clots is actually going to be an increase in cell count, as we've said somewhat, and it's becoming an issue more on block calvers. So in the UK in particular, we have gone down a road of continuously reducing the levels, whereas in Europe they haven't had such an issue. So I think our customers and processors have to, on the one hand, you have to balance the use of antibiotics, and secondly, the cell counts.
Yeah, changing perspective about what is a good cell count when it comes to responsible antimicrobial use.
And how important do you think actually getting on each other's farm was to the success of the whole project?
Oh, pivotal. I don't think these would have been successful if we did it maybe we did it in the pub, but
no, seriously. Yeah. Okay, no, but seriously, it was hard to open your gates and to open your usage, and indeed the time that was involved doing that you could do without. But once you actually got on other people's farms, I think the benefit of you actually were more and more honest as you went on through the process. And like I said, you got more out, and you always come away from something. If you can go away and you come back and you have one little thing that you feel was a benefit, then that was worthwhile.
Yeah, and I've been collating all the, I think people have changed on their farms since starting this, because I'm writing up my thesis at the moment, and there are loads of things that, yeah, some have been disregarded, but actually we're talking hundreds of changes people have made, whether they were on their action plan or not, but things that they've either been inspired to do partially or directly from being in this project, from seeing other farms. So it's a really good learning tool, really, I suppose.
Well, I think that's a great point to finish on, and good luck with writing up your thesis. And I think we'll all look forward to seeing that when it's published and the publications that come out of that. And a big thank you to everybody who joined us this evening for listening. We've had a great turnout and great participation in the webinar. Please keep an eye out for the future webinars on the EuroDairy website, which is www.eurodairy.eu. And a quick reminder again that there's another EuroDairy webinar on antimicrobials tomorrow morning, which will actually give us the Swedish take on responsible antibiotic use, with Ylva Persson leading that. A special thanks, obviously, to Lisa and Graham for taking time out of their busy schedules to share their experiences with us. Thank you very much. And thank you also to Nick Lucy for the technical support and for keeping everything running very smoothly in the background. The recording of the webinar is going to be available to watch back on EuroDairy website in due course. Anyone who registered will receive an email alerting you to when it's live on the website. So that's it from HDB Dairy and EuroDairy for this evening. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.